You've probably noticed them without realizing it. Those people who seem to carry an invisible weight wherever they go. Maybe it is in how they flinch slightly when someone speaks too loudly, or how they apologize for things that aren't their fault, or how they seem to expect disappointment even when good things are happening. What you are witnessing is the lasting echo of something that happened decades ago. In bedrooms and kitchens and living rooms where a child's developing mind was learning its first lessons about how the world works. And here is the thing that'll shake you to your core. Those earliest lessons, the ones we can't even remember, become the invisible blueprint for everything that follows. Let's start with a truth that most people don't want to face. Your first few years of life matter more than everything else combined. Not your college education, not your career achievements, not even your adult relationships. Those first 1,000 days when your brain is rapidly forming neural connections based on whether you feel safe, loved, and valued. During this critical period, your nervous system is essentially asking one fundamental question. Is this world safe or dangerous? And whatever answer it receives gets hardwired into your operating system for life. When a baby cries and someone consistently responds with warmth and comfort, their developing brain learns, I matter, my needs will be met. The world is basically safe. When a baby cries and is met with irritation, neglect, or chaos, their brain learns something entirely different. I am on my own. The world is unpredictable. I need to be ready for anything. These aren't conscious thoughts, obviously. They're deeper than thought. They're biological adaptations that shape how your nervous system will respond to stress for the rest of your life. Now imagine growing up in a house where love feels like a game you can never quite figure out how to win. Maybe your parent is warm and attentive when they're in a good mood, but cold and distant when they're stressed. Maybe affection comes with strings attached. You get hugs when you are being good, but emotional withdrawal when you are inconvenient. What happens to a child's developing mind in this environment? They become hypervigilant, constantly scanning for signs of approval or rejection. They learn to read micro-expressions like a survival skill. They develop what psychologists call earned security anxiety. They desperately want connection, but they're terrified of it because it is always felt unpredictable. Fast forward 20 years. That child is now an adult who can't understand why they feel anxious, even when everything in their life is going well. They don't realize their nervous system is still running that same old program, constantly scanning for threats, waiting for the other shoe to drop, never quite able to relax into the present moment. This is what we're really talking about when we discuss childhood trauma. Not just the obvious cases of abuse or neglect, but the subtler forms of emotional unavailability that leave children feeling fundamentally unsafe in their own homes. Consider the child whose parent is physically present but emotionally absent, always on their phone, always distracted, responding to their child's bids for attention with impatience or dismissal. That child learns that their inner world doesn't matter to anyone else, so they stop sharing it. They grow up feeling profoundly lonely, even when surrounded by people. Or think about the child who becomes the family emotional caretaker. The one who learns to manage their parents' moods, who feels responsible when mom is sad or when dad is angry. That child's nervous system never gets to develop a sense of safety because they're constantly in crisis management mode. They grow into adults who feel responsible for everyone else's emotions, but have no idea how to tend to their own. The research on this is staggering and heartbreaking. The Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, one of the largest investigations into childhood abuse and neglect ever conducted, found that traumatic childhood experiences are far more common than we'd like to believe, and their impact on physical and mental health lasts a lifetime. People with high ACE scores, meaning they experienced multiple forms of childhood adversity, are dramatically more likely to struggle with depression, anxiety, addiction, heart disease, diabetes, and even early death. The correlation is so strong, it is impossible to ignore. What happens in childhood literally gets under your skin and stays there. But here is what makes this especially tragic. Most children with these experiences don't realize anything is wrong. To them, whatever they're living becomes normal. A child doesn't think, I am experiencing emotional neglect. They think, this must be what families are like. They adapt with the incredible flexibility that children possess. But those adaptations often come at a devastating cost. They might become hypervigilant people, pleasers constantly scanning for signs of disapproval. They might withdraw into themselves, learning that it is safer to need nothing from anyone. They might become controlling, trying to create the predictability they never had as children. These aren't character flaws. They're brilliant survival strategies, developed by young minds doing their best to cope with impossible situations. But what serves a child in a chaotic household can become a prison for the adult they become. Let me tell you about Jessica. She is 32, successful in her career, seems to have everything figured out, but Jessica can't sleep without checking the locks on her door 3 times. She apologizes constantly, even when she has done nothing wrong. She works 80-hour weeks, not because she loves her job, but because she is terrified of being seen as lazy or inadequate. What Jessica doesn't realize is that her nervous system is still running programming from her childhood, when nothing she did ever seemed to be enough to earn consistent love from her emotionally volatile mother. Her hypervigilance, her perfectionism, her chronic anxiety, these aren't random quirks. They're the predictable result of a nervous system that learned early that safety had to be earned and could be lost at any moment. Or consider David, who can't understand why he sabotages every romantic relationship just as it starts getting serious. He desperately wants love, but whenever someone gets close, he finds himself picking fights or creating drama that pushes them away. David grew up with a father who was unpredictably rageful, loving one moment, terrifying the next. His nervous system learned that intimacy equals danger, so now it automatically creates distance whenever someone gets too close. The cruel irony is that the people who most need love and connection are often the ones whose nervous systems make it hardest to accept. They've been wired for survival in environments where trust was dangerous, where vulnerability was punished, where their authentic selves were never quite acceptable. And here is what makes this especially heartbreaking. They usually blame themselves. They think there is something fundamentally wrong with them, some character flaw that makes them unlovable or difficult to be around. They don't realize they're carrying adaptations from a childhood that required them to be hypervigilant, self-reliant, or invisible just to survive. The scientific understanding of how childhood experiences affect brain development has exploded in recent decades. We now know that chronic stress in childhood literally changes brain architecture. The areas responsible for executive function, emotional regulation, and memory can be underdeveloped, while the areas responsible for threat detection become hyperactive. Children who grow up in chronically stressful environments have measurably different brain structures than those who grow up in consistently safe ones. Their amygdala, the brain's alarm system, becomes oversized and overactive. Their prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational thinking and emotional regulation, may be underdeveloped. This isn't their fault, and it is not permanent, but it explains so much about why certain things that seem easy for others feel impossibly difficult for people with adverse childhood experiences. Simple things like trusting a partner's love, believing they deserve good things, speaking up for themselves, or even just relaxing and enjoying the present moment. These can feel insurmountable when your nervous system was trained for survival rather than thriving. But here is where the story gets more hopeful. The same research that shows how trauma changes the brain also reveals something remarkable about neuroplasticity. The brain's ability to form new neural pathways doesn't end in childhood, it continues throughout life. This means that while early experiences create powerful patterns, those patterns can be changed. The nervous system that learned hypervigilance can also learn safety. The brain that adapted to chaos can also adapt to peace. It is not easy, it is not quick, and it usually requires professional help, but it is absolutely possible. Recovery from childhood trauma isn't about forgetting the past or pretending it didn't happen. It is about understanding how those early experiences continue to affect you, and then slowly, patiently teaching your nervous system new ways of being in the world. For someone with a traumatic childhood, healing often means learning skills that others take for granted: how to identify and express emotions, how to set healthy boundaries, how to self-soothe when distressed, how to trust their own perceptions, how to tolerate intimacy without panic. It means developing what researchers call earned security, the ability to create stable, loving relationships, despite not having a secure template from childhood. It is like learning a second language. It takes practice, patience, and often feels clumsy at first, but it is absolutely achievable. One of the most powerful moments in healing happens when someone finally understands their own story. There is often a profound sense of relief when they realize their struggles aren't evidence of personal failure, but normal responses to abnormal circumstances. This understanding shifts the internal narrative from "what is wrong with me" to "what happened to me, and how is it still affecting me?" That shift opens up possibilities for healing that simply don't exist when someone believes their difficulties are just inherent character flaws. But let's be honest about something else. Even with extensive therapy and personal growth, people who experience childhood trauma often carry a particular kind of grief. You can heal, you can create secure relationships, you can learn to regulate your nervous system, but you can't go back and get the unconditional love you needed at age 3. You can't undo the hypervigilance that got wired into your system. You can't reclaim the innocence that was lost too early. And maybe that is okay. Maybe the goal isn't to become someone who never experienced trauma, but to become someone who has integrated their experiences in a way that allows them to live fully and love deeply. Many people who've worked through childhood trauma develop extraordinary gifts, heightened empathy, deep intuition about others' emotional states, remarkable resilience, and a profound appreciation for authentic connection. They become the friends who notice when you are struggling before you even say anything. They become the advocates who fight for vulnerable people because they remember what it felt like to be powerless. There is a concept called post-traumatic growth, the idea that struggling with significant challenges can lead to positive changes in how someone relates to others, perceives themselves, and finds meaning in life. It doesn't make the trauma worthwhile. Nothing could do that. But it acknowledges that humans have an incredible capacity to transform suffering into wisdom. The people who've walked through the fire of childhood trauma often become our healers, our teachers, our most compassionate leaders. They develop what one researcher calls survivor wisdom, insights that can only come from having lived through profound difficulty and made meaning from it. If you are someone reading this who recognizes yourself in these descriptions, here is what I need you to understand. Your struggles aren't evidence of weakness. They're proof of incredible strength. Every day you've survived, every relationship you've attempted, every moment you've chosen hope over despair. These are acts of extraordinary courage. Your nervous system learned to protect you in the only way it knew how given the circumstances you faced. Those protective mechanisms may not serve you well now, but they kept you alive then, and that matters immensely. Healing is possible. It is not easy. It is not linear. And it often feels like taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but it is absolutely possible. The brain that adapted to survive trauma can also adapt to thrive in safety. You deserve relationships that feel safe. You deserve to take up space without apology. You deserve patience with your own healing process. You deserve the love you didn't get as a child, even if you have to learn to give it to yourself first. And if you are someone who had a relatively secure childhood reading this, please understand, the people around you who struggle with things that seem simple to you aren't being dramatic or choosing to be difficult. They're working with nervous systems that learn different lessons about safety, trust, and worthiness. Your consistency, patience, and understanding can be profoundly healing for someone whose early experiences taught them that relationships are unpredictable or that their needs don't matter. The tragedy of childhood trauma is real and profound. It robs children of the carefree innocence that every child deserves. It creates struggles that can echo through generations if left unaddressed. It forces young minds to develop survival skills when they should be learning to play and explore and trust. But here is what I've learned from working with countless people who've walked this path. Trauma may be where your story begins, but it doesn't have to be where it ends. In the hands of someone committed to healing, even the most painful experiences can become sources of wisdom, compassion, and strength. The child you once were, the one who endured, who adapted, who kept hoping even when hope seemed impossible, deserves to be honored, not by staying stuck in the past, but by creating a present that finally offers the safety, love, and peace they always deserved. Your childhood experiences shaped your nervous system and influenced your patterns of relating, but they don't define your potential. The story that began with confusion and pain can still have chapters of joy, connection, and deep fulfillment. Recovery isn't about becoming someone who never experienced trauma. It is about integrating those experiences in a way that allows you to live with an open heart, to love and be loved, to trust your own wisdom, and to create the kind of safety for others that you wished someone had created for you. The most beautiful thing about human resilience isn't that we can survive terrible circumstances. It is that we can transform them. We can take the very experiences that once threatened to destroy us and turn them into sources of strength, wisdom, and compassion. The tragedy of childhood trauma is that it happens at all. But the triumph, and it is a triumph, is that it doesn't have to be the final word in anyone's story. With understanding, support, and commitment to healing, even the most wounded among us can learn to thrive. Your past may have taught you to expect disappointment, but your future can teach you to trust in possibility. The child who learned that the world was unsafe can grow into an adult who creates safety for themselves and others. The heart that closed to protect itself can learn to open again. This is the real story of childhood trauma. Not just the wounding, but the healing. Not just the survival, but the transformation that becomes possible when someone finally understands their own story and commits to rewriting its ending.